I want him gone. Today. The words sliced through the air like a blade. Gerald Weston, Draught Regional Manager of Maxwell Technologies. A towering man in a designer suit with slick back hair and a perpetual scowl, jabbed a finger toward the young black employee standing silently by the warehouse door. The morning staff meeting had just ended, and the floor was buzzing with energy until Gerald's voice slammed into the room like a hammer. "Excuse me," barked Angela, the HR coordinator, a petite woman in glasses who had learned over the years to pick her battles. But this one was different. "You heard me," Gerald said, his voice oozing arrogance. "That boy Derek or Daryl or whatever his name is, he doesn't belong here. Sloppy, distracted, clearly not trained. I want his badge by lunch." The boy in question, Darian Cole, stood frozen. He was 23, lean but strong, dressed in regulation warehouse blues. His hands were still gloved from loading shipments. He had spoken maybe 5 words that morning. Now, his throat tightened. "My name is Darian," he said evenly, "and I haven't done anything wrong." Gerald stepped closer. His voice dropped, but his eyes burned with barely contained fury. "This is a professional environment. We don't need attitudes, or excuses, or distractions." He shot a glance at Darian's skin, just for a split second, but enough for everyone to catch the insinuation. Angela opened her mouth to speak again, but Gerald raised his hand. "I've made my decision. File the paperwork. He's out." The silence that followed was suffocating. Darian clenched his jaw. His pride screamed for him to lash out, but he'd been raised better. He simply nodded once, turned, and walked out of the warehouse floor. Behind him, some employees exchanged uneasy looks. Others glanced away. Only Angela dared to whisper, "I'm so sorry." Darian didn't respond. He walked to the locker room, ripped off his gloves, and sat down heavily on the bench. His hands trembled with frustration. This wasn't the first time he'd seen racism, but it was the first time it cost him a job he'd actually loved. 3 weeks on the job. 3 weeks of showing up early, staying late, asking questions, working hard, and for what? He pulled out his phone and sent a quick message. "Hey, it happened, just like we guessed." A few seconds later, a response lit up the screen. "Be calm, be patient. I'll handle this." Meanwhile, back upstairs, Gerald strolled into his corner office, poured himself a coffee, and leaned back in his chair with smug satisfaction. "These people think they can walk into my warehouse, act like they belong," he muttered, almost amused. "Not on my watch." He barely looked up when his assistant, Riley, entered the room. "Sir, corporate just called. The new CEO is arriving today. Surprise visit." Gerald blinked. "Today? What the hell for?" Riley hesitated. "Apparently he wants to walk the floors." Quiet observation. "They said to make sure everything runs smoothly." Gerald smirked. "Perfect timing. I just cleaned up some trash. Downstairs." Darian stepped out of the building into the crisp morning air. He didn't go home. He walked across the street, leaned against a parked car, and waited. A sleek black Mercedes pulled up 10 minutes later. Out stepped a sharply dressed man in a tailored gray suit, early 50s, tall, dark-skinned, with flecks of silver at his temples and a presence that turned heads. Elias Cole, the new CEO of Maxwell Technologies. Darian straightened. "Dad." Elias put a hand on his son's shoulder. "You good?" Darian nodded. "Didn't give him any reason. He just saw me and decided I didn't belong." Elias's jaw tightened, but his voice remained calm. "Then let's go see if I do." Inside, Gerald was giving a condescending pep talk to the supervisors when Angela's headset crackled to life. "Angela, lobby says someone's here for you. Claims to be Elias Cole." Angela's heart skipped. She dropped everything and bolted toward the lobby, almost knocking over a stack of papers. When she arrived, Elias and Darian were already inside. Elias extended a hand. "You must be Angela. Thank you for handling this morning professionally. May we speak privately?" Angela's mind raced. "Of course. This way." She led them to the executive meeting room and shut the door. Sir One had no idea. "I'm not here for apologies," Elias said. calm but firm. I need you to bring Gerald Weston to this room. Now. And I want the department leads present. No excuses. Angela nodded, trembling. Yes, sir. 15 minutes later, Gerald swaggered into the room, trailed by 4 department heads. He stopped cold when he saw Elias at the head of the table and Darian beside him. What's this? Gerald asked, confused but trying to maintain composure. Who are Elias Cole? Elias said, rising. Your new CEO. The room fell into a stunned silence. And this, Elias gestured to Darian, is my son. Gerald's face turned from pink to ash gray. I didn't, there's been a mistake. Elias held up a hand. Let's be very clear. You fired a qualified employee this morning based on nothing but your personal bias. Not performance, not attendance, not feedback. You fired him because of how he looked. Gerald's mouth opened, but nothing came out. Let me guess, Elias continued. You didn't bother to read his resume. Didn't notice he interned at 3 of our partner firms. That he graduated top of his class. That he's fluent in Mandarin and worked logistics in Shanghai for 2 years. More silence. Elias's voice sharpened. Or maybe you did, and it didn't matter, because all you saw was a young black man in a warehouse job, and your mind filled in the rest. One of the department heads, Marla, shifted uncomfortably. Sir, if I may, we didn't know Darian was my son, Elias snapped. You shouldn't have to know. Someone's bloodline to treat them with respect. Gerald finally spoke, his voice dry and cracking. Sir, I deeply regret this. Had I known, Elias stepped closer, voice cold now. That's exactly the problem. You only regret it because of who he is, not what you did. Darian remained silent, watching the man who'd humiliated him squirm. Effective immediately, Elias announced. Gerald Weston is relieved of his duties. HR will escort you from the building. Security will collect your badge. No, please. Gerald's voice broke. This is my career, my pension. You threw away someone's dignity over a stereotype. Now you get to learn what consequences feel like. Security entered as if on cue. Gerald staggered back. This is madness. I've given 20 years to this company. And you wasted them on hate, Elias said, as Gerald was led away, eyes wide with disbelief. Darian finally spoke. Now you know how it feels to be dismissed without cause. Elias turned to the stunned supervisors. Let me make this crystal clear. This company will no longer tolerate hidden discrimination. Not in whispers, not in winks, not in firings based on skin tone. You treat everyone with respect, or you don't belong here. Angela wiped away a tear, her voice barely above a whisper. Thank you. Later that day, Elias and Darian stood outside, looking up at the building. You didn't have to do that, Darian said. I did, Elias replied. Not just for you. For every other Darian who doesn't have a CEO for a father. Darian smiled faintly. So, do I still work here? Elias laughed. That's up to you. But next week, you start in a leadership training program. Darian grinned. Now that's justice. Darian laughed lightly. The weight of the morning starting to lift from his shoulders, he looked up at the steel and glass tower of Maxwell Technologies, now gleaming in the afternoon sun. And for the first time in hours, he didn't feel small beneath it. He felt power stirring, not the kind that comes from a title, but the power of knowing your worth had finally been seen. Inside, the office was buzzing. Word spread faster than fire in a dry forest. The manager got fired. The new CEO's son worked undercover. Whispers turned to wide-eyed stares. The warehouse guys who'd seen it unfold firsthand started piecing the story together, with those who'd just heard rumors. By the time Darian walked back inside with his father, people were practically holding their breath, but Elias was composed as ever, striding confidently through the halls with his son in tow. They stopped at the executive elevator. Where are we going? Darian asked, uncertain. To my floor. You'll need to see what the top looks like if you're going to run this place one day. The elevator opened with a soft ding, and they stepped into a space unlike anything Darian had seen. Polished floors, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city skyline, and offices that seemed built for titans. Elias led him into a private corner office with his name already etched on a frosted glass panel. "Wow," Darian whispered. "Don't be intimidated," Elias said, standing beside him. "These are just walls. What matters is what happens inside them." Darian turned slowly. "Can I ask something? Anything? Why did you let me start in the warehouse? Why not just bring me in upstairs from the beginning?" Elias leaned against his desk. "Because that's not how I raised you. You said you wanted to understand the company from the ground up. You wanted to earn it. And because I knew, sooner or later, someone like Gerald was going to test you." Darian looked away. "You expected this. I didn't want it, but I knew the world we live in." Elias crossed his arms, "And I knew it would happen. Better that it happened while I could still catch you." Darian swallowed hard, the memory of Gerald's cold stare flickering in his mind. "It still hurt. I know." Elias's voice softened. "It always does. But you didn't fold. You walked out with dignity. That's power. That's leadership." A knock came at the door. Angela peeked in. "Mr. Cole, sorry to interrupt. HR has completed Mr. Weston's exit paperwork. Also, you asked for a company-wide staff meeting this afternoon. They're ready whenever you are." Elias nodded. "Thank you, Angela. 15 minutes. Angela hesitated. Her eyes flicked to Darian. "May I just say, what you both did today, it meant something to a lot of people." "Good," Elias said simply. "We're just getting started." Downstairs, the staff auditorium filled quickly. Some stood in the back. Others crowded the aisles. The buzz was electric, people wondering what the new CEO would say. If he would address what happened. If this marked a real change or just corporate theater. Elias stepped onto the small stage. Darian just behind him. No podium, no PowerPoint, just presence. He looked over the crowd and began. "Today, you saw something that's been happening in workplaces all over the country, probably all over this company for years. A young, qualified black man was fired, not for his performance, not for his conduct, but because of someone else's prejudice." Murmurs rippled through the room. "You saw the system fail. You saw a gatekeeper someone trusted with power abuse it, based on assumptions and stereotypes." He paused. "What you may not know is that young man is my son. But that's not what makes this a tragedy. What makes it a tragedy is that if he wasn't my son, none of you would have heard about it. He'd be gone, and the story would be buried under excuses." The room fell completely still. "I want you to know something. I didn't become CEO to polish trophies or climb the corporate ladder higher. I came here to break the cycle, to ensure that every employee, no matter what they look like, who they love, or where they come from, is treated with fairness, dignity, and respect." He stepped to the side and gestured to Darian. "This is Darian. Many of you worked with him. You saw him loading boxes, hauling freight, staying late without complaint. What you didn't see is that he speaks fluent Mandarin, has international logistics experience, and a degree from a top university." Gasps of surprise filtered through the crowd. "You didn't see it because Gerald didn't want you to. Because he didn't want to believe someone like Darian could be someone exceptional." Elias stepped back to center stage. "But let me be clear, Darian's not here because he's my son. He's here because he's qualified. And next week, he begins a training program that will prepare him for leadership in this company." Some applauded quietly, then louder. It spread like a wave. "But this isn't just about him," Elias continued, raising a hand. "It's about all of you. I want a company where anyone from the mailroom to the boardroom can thrive if they work hard and treat others with respect." Applause erupted again, this time thunderous. "And if you can't live up to that standard, if you think like Gerald did, then I suggest you turn in your badge before I find you." The message was clear, the tone unshakable. The change had arrived and it wore no disguise. After the meeting, people approached Darian quietly, respectfully. Some shook his hand. A few apologized for not speaking up. Others simply said, "We see you now." He nodded, graciously, even to the ones who'd ignored him just hours earlier. That evening, Elias and Darian walked out of the building together. The sun was setting, casting golden streaks across the city. Long day. Elias said, "The longest." Darian agreed. "You okay?" "I think I am now," Darian said. "You," Elias smiled. "I've waited 20 years to give a speech like that." "I'm more than okay." They reached the car. Before getting in, Darian looked back one last time. "You really think I can lead this place one day?" Elias opened the door, paused, and looked at his son with quiet pride. "I don't think it. I know it." And as the city lights began to flicker on, the boy who'd been discarded like nothing now stood on the edge of something far greater than revenge. He was ready to lead, and the company would never be the same. The next Monday came with the buzz of dot change. Darian arrived at the Maxwell Technologies headquarters, dressed in a crisp, charcoal gray suit that clung to him like purpose. The same loading dock crew who once saw him in faded overalls now watched him step into the building like he owned the floor. Some gave small nods. Others tried not to look too surprised. But Darian didn't walk with arrogance. He walked with memory. Every box he lifted, every insult he bit back, every time someone looked through him like air, he carried all of it with him, not as a burden, but as fuel. Angela was waiting for him in the lobby, holding a welcome packet. "First day of leadership onboarding," she said, smiling. "You ready?" "As I'll ever be," he replied. She led him to the 11th floor, the executive training suite. The air was different there, cleaner, quieter, thick with ambition. Waiting inside were 4 others, all new, management candidates. Darian quickly took them in. A sharp, blonde woman in her 30s named Tessa, a soft-spoken Indian-American guy named Raj, an older white man with a military buzz cut named Kurt, and a fresh-faced Ivy League type named Evan who barely glanced up from his phone. Angela introduced Darian last. "And this is Darian Cole. Some of you may recognize the last name." Evan looked up finally. "The CEO's son." Darian gave a small nod. "That's me." Tessa smiled warmly. Raj gave a respectful "niece to meet you." But Kurt only squinted, and Evan muttered under his breath, "Well, that explains a lot." Darian ignored it. The week was intense presentations, simulations, meetings with department heads, and one-on-ones with Elias himself. Darian soaked it all in. But no matter how hard he worked, whispers followed him like shadows, fast-tracked because of his father. Warehouse kid playing dress-up. Let's see how long he lasts. One afternoon, after leading a flawless logistics breakdown presentation, Darian overheard Evan laughing in the break room. "Guy thinks he's the next Obama just because Daddy fired a racist. He's not fooling anyone." Kurt chuckled. "He's not bad, but let's be real. He wouldn't be here without the last name." Darian stood just outside the door, frozen. A rage boiled in his chest. He could storm in, confront them, make them squirm, but he didn't. Instead, he walked away. He had a different strategy. That Friday, Elias called him into his office. "How's it going?" "Good," Darian said quickly. Elias narrowed his eyes. "Try again." Darian sighed. "They're not saying it to my face, but I hear it. They think I don't belong here." Elias leaned back in his chair, then proved them wrong. "I shouldn't have, too," Darian snapped before he could stop himself. "I shouldn't have to work twice as hard just to be seen as half as good." Elias didn't flinch. "No, you shouldn't. But here's the truth. You will. And you already knew that before you walked in this door." Darian stared at him. "You think I didn't I'd get the same whispers when I joined the board of directors? That I wasn't called the diversity hire? That I didn't see emails calling me a quota behind closed doors?" Darian was silent. Elias leaned forward. "They don't want you here, not because you're not good, but because if you really are better than them, it breaks everything they believe about who deserves to lead. So break it. That night, Darian stayed in the office long after the others left. He pulled data reports, case studies, financial breakdowns. By 2 a.m., he had built a full-scale proposal for a warehouse automation system that would cut costs by 18% and reduce errors by 35%, all backed by numbers. He didn't tell anyone. He waited. The following week, the leadership cohort was given a challenge. Propose one company-wide improvement project. Presented to the board, best one gets, implemented, and you lead it. Evan pitched a flashy marketing rebrand. Tessa proposed a hybrid work policy. Raj recommended a mentorship program. Kurt suggested increased security surveillance. And Darian, he walked in with graphs, projections, and a calm, confident voice. Most of our inventory loss happens in the last mile of movement. That's because we rely on outdated tracking. But with this automated tagging and scanning system, synced with our cloud dashboard, we can not only reduce human error, but also increase order accuracy, employee safety, and client retention. The board was impressed. Even the skeptics had to admit it was solid. But when Darian finished, he didn't look at them. He looked straight at Kurt and Evan in the back of the room and smiled. 3 days later, Elias summoned him. They chose your proposal. Darian's heart leapt. Seriously. You'll be overseeing the implementation team, starting next week. Who's on it? Elias handed him the file. At the top of the list, Evan and Kurt. Darian looked up slowly. You did that on purpose. Elias grinned. Oh, I absolutely did. What followed was 3 brutal months of trial by fire. Evan undermined every meeting. Kurt grumbled orders but never followed through. They tested him at every step, hoping he'd snap. But Darian stayed calm, methodical, professional. He gave credit where it was due, took blame when things went wrong. And when the project launched in the New Jersey warehouse ahead of schedule, under budget, and with error rates down 40%, even they had to admit he delivered. Kurt was the first to crack. One night, after a site visit, he pulled Darian aside. I was wrong about you. Darian looked at him, eyebrows raised. You work like a soldier. You don't quit. You earned this. Darian nodded. Thank you. Evan never apologized, but he started showing up early to meetings, started listening. He even called Darian boss once quietly, but it was enough. Back at HQ, the mood began to shift. People saw Darian differently now, not as the CEO's son, but as the guy who'd done what few could. One afternoon, as he stepped into the elevator, Angela joined him. Just had to say, the interns all talk about you. They say if he can go from warehouse to leadership, maybe they can too. Darian smiled. That's the point, right? But it wasn't over yet. 2 weeks later, Elias called him into his office with a serious face. There's something you need to see. He handed Darian a printed email. Subject, concern regarding nepotism and unfair promotions. Darian read it. Then again, Evan sent this. Elias nodded, went straight to the B board. Claims the whole leadership challenge was rigged in your favor. Said you had insider help. Darian's throat tightened. Is the board buying it? No, Elias said firmly. But this is a warning shot. There are still people who want you out. Darian handed the paper back. Then let them come. Elias smiled, proud. That's my son. But he knew what came next wouldn't be easy. And he was right. The storm didn't take long to form. By the end of the week, Elias received 2 more anonymous complaints, each echoing the same accusation: nepotism, favoritism, unethical advantage. The language was carefully crafted, legalistic, written to poison minds without sounding emotional. By Monday morning, the board had called an emergency meeting. Not just any meeting, an internal ethics review. Elias, while still CEO, would be expected to recuse himself from leading it. The chairwoman of the board, a steely-eyed titan named Meredith Langdon, would preside. You knew this would happen. Elias told Darian quietly as they sat in his office. I didn't expect the knife to come from behind, Darian muttered. Elias watched his son carefully. You can walk away. I'll shield you. No, Darian said, his voice hardening. If I walk away now, they win. I've worked too damn hard. Elias nodded once. Then you'll need to fight, but not with anger, with proof, with poise, with strategy. That evening, Darian stayed in the office until the cleaning crew arrived. He gathered every email, every version of the automation proposal, every timestamp, every meeting transcript. He cross-referenced records, pulled server access logs, and even requested Angela's help to verify how the leadership challenge had been structured. Angela didn't hesitate. I've got your back. They don't scare me. By Thursday, the hearing was set, a private conference room at the top of the building. 12 board members seated around a U-shaped table. Meredith Langdon at the center, dressed in navy with her iconic white streak of hair like a bolt of lightning. Elias sat in the back, silent and stone-faced. Evan was there too, smug in a silver tie, pretending neutrality. Darian stood alone at the front. Meredith began. Mr. Cole, the board has reviewed concerns alleging that your recent promotion and project selection were influenced by your familial relationship with the CEO. You have the opportunity now to present evidence and defend your integrity. Darian's heart pounded, but he met her gaze steadily. Thank you, Chairwoman Langdon. He began with the structure of the challenge, how it was anonymous, judged blindly, and scored by 3 independent executives who never saw names. He showed the rubric, the scores, the ranking. Next, he presented server data showing that the proposal was uploaded from his account at 2:13 a.m., 4 days before any announcement was made. No coaching, no interference. He passed out printed packets. Page 6. You'll see the side-by-side of every pitch. The feedback was clear. Mine scored highest in cost reduction, feasibility, and long-term ROI. A few board members nodded silently as they flipped pages. Then came the final blow. I've also included a timeline of email exchanges between Mr. Evan Price and several department heads, one of which shows he forwarded confidential proposal templates to 2 other candidates after the submission window. Clear violation of the challenge rules. A gasp rippled across the room. Evan sat up. That doesn't mean, Meredith turned sharply. Mr. Price, are you denying the email chain? Evan faltered. I was just helping colleagues prepare. It wasn't. Did you offer the same help to Mr. Cole? She asked coldly. Evan's mouth opened, but nothing came out. Meredith looked back at Darian. Anything else? One thing, Darian said. He held up a photo. It was grainy but clear. Gerald Weston and Evan Price, seated together at a golf club weeks before Gerald's firing. This man tried to humiliate me out of this company, and the man who accused me of cheating was once his mentee. I'm not saying that's illegal, but I think it's relevant. The silence that followed was thick. Meredith tapped her pen. The board will deliberate. You'll be notified within the hour. Darian stepped out into the hallway and finally exhaled. Elias joined him seconds later. You brought the hammer, he said. I just told the truth, Darian replied, loud enough they couldn't ignore it. An hour later, Meredith emerged, her face unreadable. The board has unanimously cleared Mr. Darian Cole of any wrongdoing. Furthermore, we recommend that Mr. Price be removed from the leadership program, effective immediately. Evan stood abruptly. This is ridiculous. You may leave the premises, Meredith said without raising her voice. Evan stormed out. Security followed him. Darian stood still, almost numb. Then Elias put a hand on his shoulder. You didn't just survive, Elias said. You won. But Darian wasn't smiling. Why do we always have to win like this? Bleeding, proving, not defending who we are. Elias's voice turned quiet. Because the world doesn't hand us anything. We have to carve our names into the stone. That weekend, Darian didn't work. He drove out of the DA city, found a quiet spot near a lake, and sat in silence. No emails, no titles, just wind, water, and breath. And when he returned Monday morning, he was ready. At the next executive meeting, Meredith stood to make an announcement. In light of recent events and in recognition of performance, leadership, and resilience under pressure, the board has created a new position, Director of Operations Strategy. She turned toward Darian, and we're appointing Mr. Darian Cole. The room burst into polite applause, some genuine, some hesitant, but it didn't matter. Darian stood tall. He had started at the bottom. He had been fired for the color of his skin, and now he was a director. As the meeting adjourned, Elias walked beside him quietly. "You sure you're ready for what's next?" he asked. Darian smiled. "I was ready the day he tried to break me." And from that day forward, no one ever forgot his name. Weeks passed, then months. The company changed. Not overnight, not easily, but visibly. It started with the hiring policies, then the diversity training, real ones, not just checkbox seminars. Anonymous surveys were sent, listening sessions held, whispers were confronted, patterns exposed. The cracks that Gerald had covered with fear were now being filled with truth. And leading it all, behind the scenes, was Darian. As Director of Operations Strategy, he traveled from region to region, visited warehouses, sat in shipping yards, met with night crews, asked questions, actually listened. Word spread that he knew the grind because he'd lived it, that he respected the work, the people, and people began to follow him. But not everyone was on board. One afternoon during a quarterly review, a veteran executive named Clark Mendenhall stood up, mid-meeting. "With all due respect," he said, glaring across the table at Darian, "some of us are tired of all these changes. The company ran just fine before." Darian didn't flinch. "It ran," he said, "but it didn't rise. Not for everyone," Clark scoffed. "And what you're going to build a company where everyone wins?" "No," Darian said, calm but piercing. "I'm building one where no one loses just because of who they are." Silence. And then, from across the room, one voice broke the tension. It was Marla, the same department head who had watched Gerald fire Darian months ago. "I like this company better," she said quietly. "Feels like we're finally waking up." More nods followed, quiet, then bold. Clark sat down, silent. After the meeting, Elias called Darian into his office. "Marla told me what happened," Elias said. "You could have embarrassed Clark." "You didn't," Darian shrugged. "What's the point of humiliating someone who already fears change? I'd rather prove him wrong with results." Elias looked at his son for a long moment. "You know, when I was your age, I wanted to burn every room I walked into. And now I watch you walk into them and fix what I couldn't." Darian blinked, surprised by the emotion in his father's voice. Elias stepped closer. "You've done more than I ever imagined, more than I dared imagine. You turned a firing into a fire. And now this company is waking up because of it." Darian didn't speak. He didn't need to. His eyes said everything. That night, there was a company gala, a celebration of milestones, growth, and transformation. For the first time in years, the event wasn't hosted by the CEO. Elias had passed the mic to someone else. Darian stood at the podium in front of thousands of employees and guests. Lights flashed, glasses clinked, but he didn't begin with numbers or titles or slogans. He told them a story. Once, not too long ago, a young man walked into this company just trying to work, to contribute, to learn. And someone looked at him and decided he didn't belong, that he wasn't worth keeping. He paused, scanning the crowd. Everyone was quiet now. Even the waiters had stopped moving. "That young man was me." Murmurs rippled. And that moment, that firing, it could have crushed me. But it didn't, because my worth wasn't decided by someone else's ignorance. And neither is yours. More than a few in the crowd blinked hard. I stand here today, not because I fought back alone, but because people believed in justice, in change, in each other. And if this company can go from where it was to where it's going, then so can the world outside these walls. He let that hang. Let them feel it. Let this place be a mirror for what's possible. Not perfect, but honest. Not flawless, but fair. Thunderous applause. Some stood, others wiped tears. And in the back of the room, Elias stood with arms crossed, his eyes misty. For the first time in years, he felt something heavier than pride. He felt peace. After the gala, father and son stepped onto the rooftop alone. The city shimmered below, alive and endless. You know, Elias said, when you were 10, I asked you what you wanted to be when you grew up. I said a superhero. Darian laughed. You said, someone who stops bad guys. Well, Darian said, looking out at the skyline. I guess I still kind of want that. You've already done it, Elias said. You didn't just stop a bad guy. You changed a system. A long silence passed between them. Then Darian turned, eyes searching his father's. Do you think I'm ready to run it, the whole thing? Elias didn't hesitate. One day, yes. And when that day comes, it won't be because of your name. It'll be because of your work. Darian nodded slowly. Below them, the city buzzed. Inside, the company celebrated. But on that rooftop, under the stars, a father and son stood not as CEO and heir, not as boss and employee, but as two black men who had fought for dignity, for equity, and for each other, and won. Because when a racist manager fired a black employee, thinking he was expendable, he didn't just lose an argument. He lost to a legacy, and that legacy had only just begun.